This is my vintage Cannondale Killer V 900 HT. It's vintage because I bought it brand new back in 1996, and like it, I've gotten old, and like it, I haven't been used much. So I've gotten a little bit out of shape. So I was looking at buying a purpose-built e-bike to help kind of get me up some of the hills that I used to be able to ride with ease when I was younger and stronger. But after shopping around at those and driving some of them around or riding some of them around, I found that they were crazy expensive and that I was about to spend $5,000 on a bicycle. So rather than go and invest all that money into an e-bike for my first one, I figured I would just convert my old bike and make it into an e-bike with a Bafang mid-drive kit and a 48 volt lithium-ion battery. So let's get started on cracking this thing open and making it into a more comfortable and easy to ride e-bike. Okay, the display fitting comes with two different size diameter sleeves, so you might slip both of them on if you have skinny bars or just one, or you might use none and just hook this directly onto your bars. So in my case, I'm using just the one larger fitting. Okay, you'll notice on these fittings that there's an edge on them. So I want to make sure that that edge is facing in towards my stem, and the reason for that is it will slide out. If it's in this way, it could slide out up on the side of the bar and this will be rattling around. You don't really want that. So if it's in this direction, it won't slide out and it'll hit the stem on the other side if it were to get loose, and it wouldn't rattle around. So I'm putting the edges in that way. And now when we take our display, the display holds it in place so it can't slide out. But if you had it in wrong, this could slide out of there. So put them in facing that way. Then make sure your display is facing upright, and put it on top of those spacers there. Then take your bracket and just loosely install it, get it started. Same on the other side. And I'm going to leave this a little bit loose, not very loose, but loose enough that it'll allow me to change the angle should there be kind of glare from the sun shining me in the eyes from this screen and making it hard to read. So now I can rotate it. So when the sun's hitting it at a funny angle and it's blinding me, I can twist it up a little bit. So now that we have the bars on and the display in place, we can get started on the shifter, followed by the brake lever and the grip. And these levers are pretty cool. These have a wire that's the cutoff for the motor, so that when you hit the brakes, it will stop the motor, which will aid you in shifting and stuff too, because this kit does not have a shift sensor. But if you look inside of there, there's a little yellow pin that's popping out when you pull the lever, and that's the indicator to the motor that you've hit the brake. Slide that guy on, and then we'll put a grip on. On these Troy Lee grips, there's actually Troy Lee designs written on it, and that's going to face the rider. So just slide that in as far as you can, and that'll kind of give you a feel for where you need to start tightening down your brake lever and your shifter. I like that. I'll give it a little twist here. Give it a little tighten. And once you have it where you want it, you can start really tightening things down. Alright, that's good and tight on here. And I've made sure that I can turn the adjustment screw here without banging into the bars. On the left side of the bars, we're going to replace our front derailleur, because we're not going to be using a derailleur on the front, with a throttle. This is a little twist throttle that came with the Bafang kit. And there's also the controller. So this is the guy that will power up the system. You'll add pedal assist or remove pedal assist by hitting the minus. I'm going to put the throttle, this really probably should be on the right side, so the cable is going to stick out kind of funny instead of angling towards the center of the bike like it should, because I want to be able to push it down and have my thumb down wrapped around the grip rather than up and forward like this. But you may prefer that, so your call. Once we have this in place, we can tighten up the throttle closer to it. Then we're going to make sure that the throttle isn't banging into the bottom of the brake lever, and get all that squared away. Now I'm going to line up my brake lever to match kind of the position I have it on the other side. And then position your throttle such that when you pull the brake lever, it's not hitting. So if I were to have it here, right, it wouldn't let me pull the brake all the way. So you want to get this out of the way such that the brake can be fully applied, even though we're going to set it to be about there, you know, just to make sure you have enough clearance. The last thing you're going to attach is this little button pad. It's connected to the back of your display, but it's got this little bracket that attaches to the back of it. With that button pad installed, as you can hear, it's got a good little tactile feel. Throttle's installed, brake lever's installed. Don't worry about all the wires yet, we'll get to that little wire management activity where we try and, you know, make it look a little bit less like a bowl of spaghetti up here. So this is a pretty straightforward process. There's a slot on the front of this, and then there's a slot in the screws that are adjustment screws. So you line those up with the slot that's on the front. Let me get that done for you here. And then this is tucked inside of there, but pull that out so that this guy pokes out. Put your barrel in there and then run your cable through it. And then put this cable into that opening, give it a twist so it doesn't fall out again. Alright, now let's take this crank off and put on the Bafang motor. Starting with a big Allen bolt here. And these can be tight. We'll take that guy off. We'll do the other side too. So the first thing you do with a crank puller is tighten it onto the bike with a pin pulled in, and then as you tighten this pin into the puller, it pushes this out and pulls your crank off with the threads that are on there. So let me show you. That's good and tight, so now we tighten this until it pulls the crank off of the bike. So in my case, this is a 15mm nut. I'm just going to tighten it until it pulls the crank off. So it's starting to get looser as you're tightening it in. That's because it's pulling it away. That should be golden. Let's do the other side before we pull this completely off. So again, I've threaded down my crank puller. I'll push this guy all the way in. And once he's in there and seated pretty well, start tightening in the puller until you hit ground. Take your 15mm wrench and start tightening it. When you feel it get easy, and that's because you successfully pulled your crank off. So see how far out that pushed? Now we can slide off the crank. And now remember, the chain is holding this guy on too, so it's going to be a little spring loaded. Now my bike is so dingy. I mean, can you see that filth in there? I'm going to have to do a little dental work in here before I can start turning some bolts, because I want to get a good grip on these retainers. So on the right side of the bike, you're going to want to turn it to the right. The right threads. And then on the left side of the bike, you want to turn it left. These are threaded pretty deep. You can pull the whole unit out. It's got a little grease on it. And over the other side is lefty-loosey. There's that other side off. Alright, now that we're done taking out old stuff. That means we're ready to put in new parts, which is always fun, right? This is the Bafang 8 mid-drive kit. And so let's insert the motor. Okay, now we're going to install this bracket, but before we do, I want to put some blue Loctite on the 5mm bolts that are going to retain it. So we're just going to hit that with a little bit of blue Loctite on both of these. And the blue Loctite is removable with hand tools. You don't actually have to hit it with a torch to melt the blue Loctite to take them off. So before we get that guy on there, put a little Loctite on those bolts. Now we can install this bracket that's going to hold the motor in place. And you'll see on one side of it, it has teeth sticking out. On the other side, there are depressions. So we want to make sure the teeth are facing the bike, because that's what's going to bite into the frame and keep the motor from rotating. And insert these bolts that we just put the Loctite on. Now before you crank those down, you want to make sure that you position your motor where you want it, and you don't want it to interfere. So I don't know if you can see this, but it's bumping into my shifter line. So I want to give that enough room to wiggle before I tighten it down. And again, these are 5mm Allen bolts. And next we'll install this ring on the crank and tighten it down with a spanner wrench. My spanner wrench is also my chain whip, so it's doing double duty. After you've got your ring on and you've got those two 5mm bolts tightened in, and you have the motor positioned exactly where you want it, and everything is good and tight, you can install this last locking ring, which goes over that gizmo there. And you want to tighten that down as much as you can. Now we're ready to install our crank arm. Just going to slide that guy on. Take one of the bolts they provide in the kit and tighten it in. Remember, these have to be really tight because they were really tight coming off. It's that press fitting onto that shaft that you're trying to achieve. This is looking up at the bottom of the bike. There are 3 cables that come out of the motor, and we're going to run them all back up and through the middle of the frame here, just to make them look pretty. One of them is going to go to the battery, one of them is going to go up to the display, and the other one goes to the speed sensor. Well, let's hook up the speed sensor now. So the speed sensor wire in my case is a little long for where I want it to go. So what I did here is wrap it around this little cross member in the rear part of my frame, just to use up some of the wire and kind of keep it inconspicuous, and then I'm going to run it along the side and back down to where I'm going to hook it up to the speed sensor. The fitting for this is fairly straightforward. It's kind of hard to screw it up. There's a spot on the bottom there. Just tighten it into place. Then we'll attach it to the frame using this little back-to-back sticky tape and some zip ties. Before you put this sticker on, wipe down the area that you're going to put the sticker with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. That'll help make sure you get a good bond. And after that alcohol dries, peel off your backing tape, place it where you want it on the bike, and give it a good stick, and then have some zip ties ready to loop through and hold it into place. After you have the zip ties on and you have it in the place that you want, trim off the excess zip tie. Your second to last step before you set the depth on your sensor is to attach the magnet to the spoke. And that's an easy task. Slide this guy over the spoke and take the nut and tighten it on. Get it to about your depth of the sensor. You can see that. So that it goes right over the center of that sensor. And then once you have your magnet lined up with the sensor, you can tighten down the magnet and tighten the screw into the back of the sensor to keep it from sliding back and forth. And you should be good to go. And this little black screw is the screw that you use to lock that sensor into place. This is a shot of the sensor from below, and that's where that little screw goes to lock this in so it doesn't slide around. And I put it on so that this is on the bottom, so it's a little less, I don't know, unattractive, but it's, you know, what are you going to do? It's a sensor. This is a shot of the sensor from the inside, and there's the little magnet. So you can see how I lined it up, and it's really close. I mean, I have it within a millimeter. It's not touching, but it's very close. Alright, let's install our battery holder before we get too much further. This is going to go on this bike right where the old water bottle cage used to be. And you can decide how you want it to look by sliding it up and down on these screws after you've got it in here, and you might want to scoot it down or scoot it up a little higher, but to me it's all about center of gravity, so you want this to be as low on your frame as you can tolerate it. So I'm going to put it just about as far down as I can. So that's how I did it. Before you tighten it down completely, you might want to check to make sure your battery fits. So that's how it's going to look on my bike. Like that. So there's 4 wires coming off of our bars here. There's a green one, that's that guy, he's for the display. These 2 that are female yellows are for the brake cutoffs, and then the male yellow is for the throttle. And then there's corresponding color coding and male-female for the yellows that we need to hook up to get back to the motor. Now you can see up here I've put 2 zip ties on that edge to hold that wire in place, but this piece down here just keeps on dangling around, and we don't really want it to look like that. So a trick that I'm going to use is this 3M adhesive tape. It's an automotive tape, and you use it in cars to attach things like your emblems, badges, bumpers on the doors and things like that. It's very sticky stuff. It's pretty incredible, really. And if we put some just on the back of this wire and then tuck it in there, it should hold it in there fairly permanently. So I'm going to start by measuring off a little strip of it, about the length that I think I need, and then I'm going to cut that with just scissors. So there we go. I'm going to peel the adhesive back off of it. And be pretty certain that this is where you want this to be, because it's pretty difficult to get this off once you've got it on there. So I have that tape started. I'm just going to put it on here. A little bit loose. Just tacking it in a few spots here before I peel off the backing. Wrap it around that a little bit. Just to get it around the wire. Now I'll peel the sticker off. And then place it deep in there. Okay, the Bafang kit came with these nice ends that are waterproof, and they did a nice job, but I'm not able to find these to put on for my battery, so I'm just going to cut them off and use some of these waterproof butt splicers that you just heat shrink on. So let's do that now. So sadly, they did such a nice job, I feel a little guilty about cutting it off, but guilt over. And make sure you don't have your battery on the bike when you start cutting these off. So I'm going to cut these guys down as well. And these are all 14 AWG, which stands for American Wire Gauge, I believe. So find your 14 slot on your wire stripper. Pull those out. I'm going to put this heat shrink tubing over the top of that so that we can heat shrink tube the whole thing and hide these black and red wires here after we get them butted together. So let's take that heat shrink and slide it over. This is just in preparation. And before we put our little coupler on there, twist this up a little bit. Just makes threading it into the fitting a little easier. Okay, so after you've got this guy ready, it's fairly straightforward. I like to think that the black goes with the black, but I'll mention it anyway. You want to get the colors to match. Then take your little crimp tool, crimp it in there, put it in there, and that's basically all there is to it. Well, other than the heat shrink portion of this show. We'll do that last. Okay. Red to red. Okay. Alright, so I've got a heat gun here, and on high this heat gun is good for 1100 degrees. You can see it gets nice and hot. And it only takes a second. We'll just heat these babies up. Should start to see them shrink. And that's what makes these fittings waterproof. See that close up? Alright, so now that those are hooked up, you can slide this other larger piece of shrink tube over. Like so. I'll put it right up to the base of that. And then when we heat this up, it's going to shrink over that whole space. So here we go. Start to shrink as soon as it gets hot. Now that we have the battery all hooked up, I can turn on the battery and then turn on the display. You'll see we've got a full battery there. You'll also see it's in kilometers an hour, which I'd rather it wasn't. And I think I've only got 3 levels of assist. Yep, by default there's only 3 levels of assist. So to put it into programming mode, you just press and hold the plus and minus at the same time. And now I can switch it from kilometers an hour to miles an hour, and then hit the power button to switch to the next gizmo here. And this is the speed limiter, so right now it's set at 25 kilometers an hour. Let's fix that. Oh, I think we can go faster. Where does it even top out? 50, that sounds good. What is 50? If 100 is 62 miles an hour, that's 32. Not bad. This is backlight, so you can increase or decrease the backlight. You can see it getting brighter or not. This is the time of day. It's 8:55. So oops. And there you go. So to enter the advanced setting mode, you hold down the plus and minus at the same time while pressing the power button 8 times. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that. It actually doesn't look like you can. There you go. So this is the wheel size, and it's on the right one for me, but you can arrow up and down to put in, you know, like your 29er or 700C or even smaller. I don't know why you'd put this on a kid's bike, but maybe you would. So in my case, this is a 26-inch wheel. So I'll flip on to the next one. This is its automatic off. So this is the a number of time, or amount of time in minutes that would wait to turn itself off. Its default was 5. I'm okay with that. And this is the number of assist levels, this DH3. So right now it's got 3. I'm going to make it, let's make it 4. You can go up to, I think, 9. Yeah. But I'm going to make it 4, because to me it's kind of 25% increments right now. And that's that. So now you can see that I've got 4 levels of assist. So I found all the wires running up to the bars kind of ugly. So what I did is I used some automotive electrical wire loom, and then I wrapped up the wires in that. So on the left side here I wired the throttle and the brake cutoff for the left side onto the left side of the bike, and on the right side I put this display and the right side's brake cutoff around the other side, and then I had them join up at this junction here at the top of where the battery is, and then that cable runs down into the motor. To finish off things like up here, you can zip tie it or you can wrap electrical tape around it. I'm going to use zip ties just because it's easier and less kind of gross when you're taking it apart. Electrical tape, especially after it's been in the sun, can be kind of slimy and nasty, the glue. I should note too that before you really get crazy with the zip ties, make sure that you can turn your steering both ways. Twist your bars all the way without it pulling things apart or putting stress on any of the connections. So after you do that, just go through and cut off all the excess zip tie and make sure that you rotate those zip tie ahead so that they're in a spot where they won't catch your leg when you're pedaling. So supplied with the Bafang kit is in my case, I ordered the 46 tooth sprocket, but knowing fairly well that I had no intention of actually using this front chainring, and it comes with this plastic, honestly horrible looking chain or bash guard that you attach with some screws into the plastic, and it's just plastic. So I had no intention of using this because I wanted to gear it so that I could climb hills a little bit better. So I bought this, and this is a 110mm adapter. They make them in a variety of sizes. You can get them on eBay. And then there's a variety of sprockets that you can attach to this. The one that I'm going to put on today is a 40 tooth, and this might actually still be over gear, but it's the wide narrow variety. So if you can see that, it's probably very hard to tell in this video. But there's a narrow tooth, a wide tooth, a narrow tooth, a wide tooth. And what that does is it kind of keeps the chain stuck to it, so you don't need a chain guard to hold it in place. When you're doing your final tightening, you want to really do them in a star pattern, kind of like you do on a car's lug nuts, so that you don't over torque one side of it. So tighten this bolt, then this bolt, then that bolt, then this bolt, then that bolt. So now after assembling this, it is actually considerably lighter than this is. This is heavier even without the bolts in it than this is all set up. So let's put some blue Loctite on these guys and attach it to the bike. And these came with my adapter. I'm going to install this on the bike, and we'll do the same sort of tightening method where we do it in a star pattern. So I've got them all on there loosely now, so I'm going to go through and do the star pattern to tighten them a little bit more. And that should be good. Want to see it spin? Of course you do. So next we'll throw the chain on, being careful about the wide narrow on here, and give it a little test, and we'll put the crank on and the pedals, and we'll take it for a test ride. Wide narrow, wide narrow. So I've got it in my easiest gear, the granny gear if you will, and the lowest pedal assist, and I'll give it some throttle and tell you what the speed says. And it appears it is 6 miles an hour is where it's maxing out. If I increase that pedal assist to the maximum and then give it the throttle, that's 14 miles an hour. Let's set this guy up with some crank arms and some pedals so that we can go for a ride. And on the right side of the bike, it's right to tight for your pedal, and on the left side, it's left to tight. And remember my spanner wrench? That's also my chain whip. Well, it's also my pedal wrench. There we go. And there it is, all done. New stem, new bars, new battery obviously, new motor, new seat post, new seat, new grips, new shifter, new rear derailleur, new sprocket, new pedals. It's all done up, and it's really super fun.
throttle only. It doesn't cut out, which is nice. Some bikes will cut out at 6 miles an hour or whatever in throttle mode. This one doesn't do that. I'm just coasting, I can hit throttle. The throttle will take you as high as it wants. Throttle is carrying me at 26 miles an hour. I'm not pedaling. Going uphill at 20 miles an hour. Ooh. And I'm not even breathing hard. That's pretty fun.